Good morning. This is our Commissioner Status Update. It is April 4th, 2023. The time is 10 a.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. In attendance are Commissioners Brooks, Matari, and Duncan. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. We'll get started with our first item, and this is State of the County Address, and it actually, I believe, is changed to May 31st now. Let's see. It is on our calendar. So, every year, Bruce, the chamber invites us to have a State of the County address, and this is our discussion to figure out who's going to do what and why. So, Bill, are you considering any changes from last year?
No.
Okay.
I can't reach that. Could you reach that?
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, so I think you did not have any slides, and you just talked about your liaisons.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much the same thing.
Okay. Bruce, do you have any thoughts on State of the County address?
I'm happy to do whatever, has typically been done in the past, and anything additional if people have.
Sure.
They'd like me to do.
So I typically reach out to my liaison groups, both the elected officials and the department heads, and I say, is there anything you want me to highlight? And then I may choose to do a couple slides. Bill's not doing slides. If you're not doing slides, I will not do slides. If you are going to do slides, then I'll probably just have a couple. But I'm not really big on slides.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I hadn't really thought about that, but I typically don't use slides.
Okay. All right, so that'll be fine. I'll probably have this on another time, like 2 weeks before the 31st in May, just to solidify maybe some thoughts and stuff that everybody has.
Yeah, perfect.
So, all right, that's that. And then now it's the Coeur d'Alene Reservation area-wide rezoning discussion with David Callahan.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Morning.
Thanks for having me. You have been privileged to a series of emails that have stressed me. And so I just wanted to get in front of you and make sure you're not stressed. Colin Coles, and mostly Colin, has raised the concern that we shouldn't be going forward with the rezoning. And you may know we were already in front of the Planning Commission. They've already done the public hearing. Now we're in deliberations. Because Colin thinks that I didn't give you everything you needed to know back in July of 21, and that would have been before Mr. Matari was a commissioner. My memory, in watching that YouTube, is it was very generic, and at that time we didn't know everything that we now know, and the then board was comfortable with us going forward. And the other wrinkle of this is that the Land Use and Development Code expressly allows the staff, the Plan Commission, or the board to initiate these kinds of rezonings. So in my view, once we'd had the discussion, and you may recall there was also a June discussion that made it into the newspapers about how we were dealing with minor subdivisions back then. So I thought you had all the information you needed to feel comfortable for me to go forward with a legislative rezoning. And I just want to touch base with you and make sure that that's still true.
You watched the video, right?
Yes, sir.
Was it a unanimous vote?
Yes, sir.
And Bruce, of course, wasn't here, but that's...
Do you have any questions or concerns? Are you familiar with what's going on?
Vaguely, not as much as obviously you are.
Sure. So much like the Cougar Gulch rezone, which you were involved in, it's kind of identical.
Very similar.
Very similar to that. This was at the behest of the tribe. And so planning and zoning, working with staff, has gone forward, and a consultant, I believe.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I think the only difference was they were talking about 50 acres and more, but now it's gone to the Planning Commission at 20 acres or more.
Right.
Is that correct?
But like Cougar Gulch, that just gets it out on the table for the Plan Commission and later for you to discuss. You can do, or the Plan Commission can recommend all sorts of variations on a theme. My main concern, and Colin seems to be unwilling to accept this, is that planning is a process. And we've done a good process of getting it out there in front of 2 workshops, one at the resort, one at, we did by Zoom, and we sent out 2,000 postcards each time. And now with the Plan Commission, we had the required public hearing notice. So I feel like the process is working the way it should. People have been notified, they're responding. We know now of the people that don't want to be involved, just like we did with the Cougar Gulch. And those are people you can tease out if you so desire. That's your call. That's why it's legislative.
Sure.
Okay. So, go ahead.
Well, I think the only other question for me was the fees, because I remember
Thank you.
having conversations about Cougar Gulch, and we went back and forth, and, it was
Right.
settled that they would pay for hard costs, and then, we had staff time
Right.
in there. So I just don't remember, did we tease that out in a meeting, or did we just give you the authority to work on the fees?
I don't remember that we actually discussed it.
Okay.
But and here's where, that's the main reason I wanted to talk today, thanks for bringing that up, and Tyrell Stevenson's here, I'd like for him to be involved in this discussion before we quit. So Tyrell, feel free to come up.
You can join David, or you can come up to
or
this seat,
whatever's
either one.
easiest. But just so you know, in the way of context, I haven't asked for any money for the process yet for a filing fee, because I thought this was the exact same in concept effort as the Cougar Gulch, where we didn't charge.
Right.
But the tribe has voluntarily paid for both postcard notices. That's $2,000 and change, $2,200 and something dollars. And then they've also agreed to do the newspaper notices, which is another $160 for both. So, the only place we're really short, I mean, normally we pick up the tab on the staff processing. In this case, we've used consultants because they didn't have staff time. So the only place we're short is the $2,000 and change filing fee that would be typical if it were an individual owner asking for an individual property. That's not this case. Here we've got 25,000 acres in a legislative process. So I thought this was going forward the way it should. If you're uncomfortable with that, now would be a good time to discuss it.
I am not. Is there any more than anybody else other than this one individual who's,
Do you know of anyone, Tyro?
Well, there are folks who object to rezoning. There are a few, and there have been complaints about criticizing process. I feel like the objections to process are a way to object to the idea generally, and I think it would be good to clean that part of it up so that the process is clear to everyone, and then get to the merits of the discussion, which would of course come before the Board of County Commissioners on any decision that's made. But the complaints I've seen about process do seem to be coming from folks that don't like the overall proposal and object to that.
So I'm going to recount the process according to what I remember, and tell me if I'm leaving anything out. Tribe approached the county, said, hey, we're looking at working on this. We've already been talking to owners, and we have a lot of owners who want to go along with us in this process of going from rural to agricultural. So a down zoning, I guess, is how it's
Yes.
termed. So then after that, we said, okay, staff, we're comfortable with that. And then staff brought it to planning and zoning. They've had 2 workshops. Now they've had a public hearing. Now we're waiting for the deliberations to come back to see what the recommendation is. Then we'll schedule a public hearing. And I think we discussed about a month or 2, maybe, duly noticed and all that coming before the board. So it sounds like to me that it followed the exact same pattern as the Cougar Gulch rezoning. So I don't know what part of the process has been left out, I guess, at this point.
In my view, nothing's been left out. I think it's perfectly before the Plan Commission and ultimately you.
Sure. So I guess my only concern would be with fees as far as, I'm fine to let this one go because you equated it to Cougar Gulch. We did make that exception. But going forward, I want to reexamine these things just a little bit more because we did pay for an outside consultant. And, we're always trying to not burden the taxpayers with something that does not affect all the taxpayers in Kootenai County.
Right.
So that would be my only concern going forward, but I would hate to just come back and say, well, yeah, we've been letting you go through this process all along, not requiring a fee, and now we're going to require one. So I don't really feel comfortable doing that, but thoughts?
Oh,
Okay.
No, it makes sense completely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good job.
So I guess we're good. Anything to add?
No, I just want to thank the board and also the Planning and Zoning Commission and the community development staff. A lot of time has gone into a lot of discussions, and with the community down there too. A lot of landowners have provided input and attended the meetings, and it's been a positive process. We feel like we really appreciate it.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you for your
Do you
time.
think we need a room bigger than this for the public hearing, or do you think this will suffice?
Yeah, from what we've seen in the Plan Commission, this would be fine.
Okay.
So far, we have 8, maybe a dozen people that don't want to be part of this,
Okay.
which truly is unusual for such a large rezoning.
Right. And equating it to Cougar Gulch, I wonder if the percentage is.
I think the mathematics will work out in land area about the same, because some of these landowners own 800 to 1,000 acres.
Right. Yeah.
So when you look at, I'm just making this up, but let's say it's 8,000 acres, pull that out of 25,000 acres.
It's about the same we
It
pulled
may
out
be
of
roughly
Cougar
the
Gulch.
same as Cougar Gulch.
Yeah, which statistically, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, thank you, and we look forward to Planning and Zoning giving us their recommendation and the scheduling of the public hearing before the board.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, item 3, National Association of Counties, better known as NACO, and it's our membership for 2023. I know this comes up every few years. Are we getting sufficient representation on the federal level? Do we want to spend $2,200 again this year? I think, Bruce, you might have the most up-to-date information from what you attended in November. Do you remember them talking about NACO at the?
They talked about it a little bit. I mean, there's always the discussion point, and then there's the practical application. I really, would be curious as to what your thoughts are as far as what you think you've been getting out of it, because you've been in office for at least the last 2 to 4 years
Right.
or more.
I struggle with it, for sure. Bill, if you have anything to add, just chime in
yeah,
here.
it really doesn't affect me.
Sure. So, I know that IAC, Idaho Association of Counties, is very in favorable of us keeping our NACO membership because they send representatives back to DC when there's sufficient county legislation on the federal level. But I have my own ideas about what the state should be doing when the federal government gets involved in counties. So I would like to call on Clerk Locke if she has any experience, since she has been here longer than I have. Have you seen a benefit from our NACO membership?
I can't necessarily say I have per se. I'm not really involved with NACO. I know right now the clerk had been receiving an invoice, but it's under the board's budget. So we had recently sent that invoice to you. I'm more involved with IAC. I think IAC has been very beneficial to the counties, but I can't speak to NACO. I haven't been involved in that process.
So I would imagine, let me find out when this thing's supposed to be due. Okay. 3, I don't actually. Well, we received the bill back in October, and I'm not really seeing a date where they want it by. So I probably, at this point, would be more in favor of paying for 23 and then having the serious discussion with IAC on what that looks like to them. However, if I have two people who are not in favor of paying it, I could go that way as well. I just would want to, reach out again to IAC, which I will be with IAC at the end of the month.
Do they ever have conferences where we send people to? Have they been productive?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. I don't know, but yes, we have our NACO representatives that are voted on, I think, by the membership or maybe by the board.
Yeah, and
they
I believe back, NACO has been kind of guiding a little bit with the ARPA money too. When I went to an IAC conference last year, they discussed NACO being kind of guiding that process with ARPA for counties. So I think you guys did budget it for this fiscal year, so maybe this next fiscal year you can determine if you want to continue on from there.
Yeah, so we can bring it back up in the budget season.
Yeah,
to
that's
do that.
fine.
Okay. All right, maybe I'll get some great information that, oh yeah, they helped us here, here, and here, but I'll actually ask for some metrics. And
I
some-
wouldn't renew it,
Okay.
definitely. I mean, IAC is one thing. This is completely different. And I read all their literature that they send out, monthly newsletters and stuff, and I find nothing that is of any help to Kootenai County.
Okay. You still want to pay it this year and re-examine?
Let me think of how to say this here. I've dealt with, no, I understand. I've dealt with a lot of trade organizations, and some of them are actually very helpful, and you can get meaningful information out of them. But the further up the national scale you go and the further removed you are, the less impact it's really going to have. There's no question in my mind that IAC does a fantastic job. I mean, they really make it a point to make sure elected officials know what's going on, how to do their job, and things like that. At this national level, if you're not seeing that kind of benefit, then I'm completely fine not paying it. It's just that I don't really like the idea of making a decision off of a brochure versus your real life experiences. So,
Well, I guess it's no harm in just having that conversation with IAC and bringing this back the first Tuesday in May at our status update and discuss it.
yeah, absolutely.
Because Jennifer, I do remember now that NACO did represent the counties well as far as the ARPA funds, but is that one item out of 10 years or, where are we at with that? So I'll have the conversation with IAC if that's okay with the board, unless you guys are putting your foot down today. Otherwise, I'll bring it back.
You can bring it back, that's fine with me, but take a lot for me to be convinced that we should take a couple $1,000s and
Sure.
Yeah, unless IAC has some, special formula here that if we contribute this money, it's going to help us.
Yep. Okay. I will look for the ROI and bring the information back the 1st of May. Thank you, Jennifer. All right. Item 4, private event security letter discussion. Bruce, please.
Yes, well, I've been here for almost 3 months now. And one of the things that I've kind of noticed is that there tends to be a lot of cost shifting that goes on in the county. And I think it's only appropriate that we start assigning costs where they should be allocated. And one of those areas is with our sheriff's office. We already know that they're pretty well overworked, pretty much understaffed, and it's important, I think from the BOCC's perspective, to make sure that the service levels don't degrade with the statutory requirements that we have to perform these services. So I thought it would be prudent to send out a letter to these cities and kind of highlight the difference between planned events and unplanned events, and where planned private events should be responsible for paying for their own security, and that should not be shifted onto our county sheriff and for it to come out of his budget. And this is standard practice in a lot of different places. We've seen it at our own fair when they have special events. They pay for the security. We had an event in Post Falls that drew thousands of people, and it was incumbent upon our sheriff to have to pay when the private event people should have paid for the traffic management and any other security. So it's a standard practice throughout the country, and I think it's just prudent that we send this draft letter, which would become not a draft letter, to the cities to remind them that they should include these private event security services, if needed, as part of the cost of holding these events.
Good idea.
Any changes to his letter? No. Okay. I probably just only have one, and that would be in the 5th paragraph. And there's nothing wrong with the language. I would just consider, using the word consider, asking them to consider putting those into their agreements. I want to recognize that the cities kind of are sovereign and we don't have authority over them. So I tend to use language that's a little more, let's play nice together rather than demands. So, and not that your language rises to a demand, but that would be my only thing, except for a couple, minor stuff.
Well, how about,
I don't want to get to the point where the cities think we're suggesting this. I want them to understand this is the way it's going to be. We're asking them to understand why we're doing what we're doing.
the only concern I have is that that they have a duty too, to the county citizens, which happen to be their city citizens. And if they really want to shift this burden onto the county, then it should be a public issue. It should be something that's very clear that they are, not willing to work with us in those particular areas. And then let their constituents at least see that for what it is. There's the right way of doing things, and then there's the legal way. And I prefer to start off with, is it right, first, is the first question to ask. And the legal one is the second or third, preferably the third. But anyhow, that's, I could look at maybe, we are requesting,
Okay.
if that
That's fine.
works.
Yep. That's totally fine. All right. So with the few changes, you can circulate it, have staff circulate it for signature, and then we can mail it out.
Okay.
So I guess, you just mentioned the city as county taxpayers, but I'm more concerned about the people in Rathdrum and Athol paying for events that are happening in Coeur d'Alene, which they're not attending. So private events and stuff. So that's, an even bigger issue for me. It's like, okay, the city's making a choice to have this event. The city residents are paying not only for their law enforcement, they're paying extra for sheriff law enforcement, but I'm more concerned with the cities not the cities, but even the unincorporated area who's subsidizing the cities.
Absolutely. And on top of that, they create these situations where they're drawing away resources that cannot serve those communities because of these events.
Yep, I agree.
So, okay.
All right, so there's direction for that, and I'd open up for public comment. All right, hearing, seeing, I'm sorry, Brandy, that's right, you do have something to address today.
Yes. Morning, Commissioners. Brandy Falcon for the record. So I just wanted to have a brief discussion about budgets, specifically for departments that report to the BOCC. So I've had a couple of BOCC departments calling me confused because my budget deadlines are not matching up with the deadlines the board is giving them. And so I just wanted to explain that each department's elected official may tell their departments to have the budget done earlier than the statutory deadline I am telling the departments, and that's because you want time to review your department's budgets. However, in our accounting system in New World, if a department calls me and says their budget is done, I want them to advance the budget to my level so that I can start to review it, because I only have 2 weeks to review 26,000 accounts in May, which is very difficult to do. So if somebody is done early, I want them to get it to me. And that doesn't mean that if you direct them to make changes later on, by your own internal deadline, that at that point, I would just move it back down to their level. So I've had a couple departments tell me they're ready to submit their budgets to me, so I just wanted to communicate with you, I'm telling your departments to do that. Submit
Yes.
it to me, and after your meeting with the board, because that you are their elected official, if you tell them to make a change, they just need to call me, and I will move it back down to their level.
Okay. So I think part of the miscommunication was because we didn't know that you could push it back
Yes.
down. We didn't want you making all the changes.
Yes,
That was
I
part
can
of the
push it back down. After May 15th, I will not move them back down.
Okay.
After that point, they're all,
Have
any
to
changes
change.
I will do.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So at this point, I think we've reached out and indicated to our department heads we wanted to meet with them kind of the first week of May. But what we can tell them with, board agreement is that get your budgets in the system as soon as possible, push them to Brandy. Then if upon the meeting with the BOCC, if there's things that we say we want taken out, Brandy will push their budget back down. They'll be able to take it out and then put it
Yeah.
back. So that way it doesn't delay our auditor's
Yeah.
process. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll get that communication out. Right, Jonathan? Thank you. All right. Anything further? All right. Hearing none. It's 10:27. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.